This is not a complete story. It was a scene written for the sake of practice, which means it doesn't have a complete plot or character arcs. All stories on the Meadow of Bluebells channel were written by a visually impaired person and recorded in this audio format for other visually impaired people. However, these stories were written as a means of practice and were not meant to obtain perfection. So while constructive criticism will be allowed, cruelty will not. Please enjoy these stories for what they are. With that said, I now introduce Broken Violin. Trigger warnings. Violence. He had expected the notes to blur on the page or his bow to skip across the strings, but he felt a calm wash over him, the music enveloping him like a shield. There were guards all around the room, still as statues. Yet he had seen enough people bleed out on the marble floors beneath his feet to know that the sharp points of their spears were an all too real threat. He tried not to look at them, doing his best to focus on the weight of the violin on his shoulder instead. It didn't sit in the groove of his neck as well as his usual instrument, but the earthy scent of the varnish coating the wood was familiar all the same. His fingers danced across the strings, following the music through instinct more than conscious thought. The song was even more familiar to him than the worn cloak and clothes he had stashed in the bushes near the palace gates. It seeped into his muscles, providing him with the strength to face the long night ahead. The amount of people in the great hall would be packed together in any other room, jostling together like a cart laden with produce, but within the purple-tinted walls of the palace the many courtiers had room to spread out. There were women laden with precious stones and men walking about in custom silk shirts. The air was heavy with a wide array of scents, from the most expensive perfumes to the bitter scent of sweat. Yet they hardly seemed to care, caught up in the intricate tapestry of court politics. There were marriages to broker and age-old rivalries to perform. The music floating through the room was drowned out by the ebbs and flows of their conversations. The violinist blocked them out in turn, tired of hearing the same talking points for the 1000th time. Amidst the monotony, a lone figure, the queen, weaved through the waves of people. They parted for her like a rock in a stream. The heavy fabric of her vibrant red dress pooled round her feet, the swirling gold designs glinting among the innumerable candles hung on the wall. Even through the thick layer, he could hear the anklets she wore jangling together like her own personal melody. She didn't have a single jewel on her person, and yet her presence drew eyes from every direction. Her face was hidden beneath a veil, but he didn't need to see her expression to recognize her determination. He had waited for this moment. They both had, and here it was at last, this final song in their elaborate orchestration. He dipped his head respectfully, continuing to play as she stopped in front of him. It had been more than a decade since they were small children romping through the palace gardens or her father's library, and yet he had to stop himself from playfully teasing her. She used to stomp her feet, struggling to hide a smile as she scolded him about ungentlemanly behavior. That little girl had faded through the years, replaced with a woman who didn't have to say a word to garner respect. Still, he could imagine the twitch of a smile beneath the gauzy cloth hiding her features. "Andre, your playing tonight rivals the master's." She spoke serenely, her head held high. "Thank you, my queen." "Is that a new instrument?" The strings vibrated beneath his calloused fingers as the bow pulled across them. Yes, one of the apprentices dropped the old one and snapped to the neck. A roar of raucous laughter echoed throughout the room. The two of them turned to see a throng of men around the royal table. Their faces were red and wine sloshed from their cups as they struggled to stay upright. Amidst their number, the violinist could see the flash of a golden circlet. Andre's stomach twisted at the sight, remembering vividly the smirk upon the king's face as it was placed upon his head for the first time. The musician had seen it almost daily since then, its luster providing a fine glow to blood-soaked floors or gleaming in the sunshine as the monarch passed peasants with shadowed eyes. The king's slurred voice bellowed above the cacophony, ordering some poor servant to come refill their goblets. When the musician glanced back at his companion, her shoulders were tense, losing the soft elegance that her governess had trained into her since their youth. However, it lasted no longer than the beat of a butterfly's wing. She breathed deeply, her limbs loosening again as the air flowed through her. When she turned back to him, it was as if the spark of frustration had never occurred. She hummed, the anklets jangling as she adjusted her skirts. "You must excuse my husband. The wine must be particularly strong tonight." A soft laugh accompanied the sentence. Still, Andre knew from their many clandestine conversations the bitter edge beneath the words. "It is a shame," she continued, gesturing at his violin, that such a fine instrument was lost, but it seems to have paid off in the end. They stared at each other, and even through the veil he could feel the weight of her eyes upon him. It was a gaze that caused most within the palace's mighty stone walls to tremble, but Andre merely smiled. Yes, I believe it has. He dipped his head again. The queen left after that, speaking with an endless series of courtiers. The musician focused on his music once more, savoring each note the violin graced him with. Soon all that remained of the candles were pools of wax. What nobles remained were too drunk to recognize it was time to leave, let alone stumble towards the exit. Andre drew his bow across the strings one last time, exhaling as the vibrations faded into nothing. The rod was placed on a stand as he lowered his violin and opened the secret compartment at the base. Within it was a dagger, small enough to hide as he made his way across the room. The metal was utterly foreign to him, its sharp edge nothing like his violin's soft curves, but he was determined to make music with it all the same.
The end. Written by MeadowofBluebells. If you have any prompts you would like to suggest, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy for any practice I can get. Have a good rest of your day.